And so I just spent 5 days. I had maybe a 5 minute thing that I had written out, and I just started performing it in front of the mirror every day by myself, performing. And even then, I still wasn't like, if I do it, will I, like, won't I? And then I just woke up that morning, the 30th, and I was like, listen, if you don't do it now, you're going to keep putting it off. So I called my brother, and I was like, all right, I'm going to do it today. He was like, all right, find a spot, find a time, let me know, tell your roommates, we'll be there to do it. And that was like the start.
Hey, I'm Alex Yang, and this is How I Decided, a show where regular people share important decisions they've made so that we can learn from them in making our own important life and career choices. Before we get into today's episode, I'd love to take a quick second to shout out an app I really love called Covey. Covey makes it easy for you to keep in touch with your friends by providing weekly notifications on who you should call and catch up with. It's super easy to use, and you can start to get weekly reminders by adding people from your contacts list and choosing how frequently you want to keep in touch with that person. When I moved from New York to Dallas, one of the things I really wanted to achieve was to do a great job of staying in touch with my friends from Jersey and NYC. But life can get really busy, and we can forget to call or text those we care about. Suddenly, 3 months have flown by and you haven't caught up. Covey allows you to stay on top of the relationships you value most. And now, whenever I have a few minutes of downtime, I give a call to someone who's on my weekly list. Covey is free to use, and you can download it from the App Store today. Now, on to today's show. Stand-up comedy. Maybe you've gone to a show or open mic before, but what is it actually like to be one of the comedians? I met my friend Ramy in my freshman year at NYU, and when I was catching up with him a few months ago, he mentioned that he was starting to do 5-minute stand-up comedy performances in New York City. I was like, wow, that is so cool, and obviously that takes a lot of courage. Public speaking is already hard, but to make a live audience laugh is another level. A big reason why I was so excited to have Ramy on this show was that I suspected that the hardest part of his decision to start doing stand-up was to overcome his fears. In this sort of decision, it's not really about logic or comparing choices, but purely just overcoming stress and fear and putting yourself out there. Hope you guys enjoy today's show. Ramy, the first thing I'd love to hear about for you is how you actually got introduced to stand-up comedy. Did you have other people who did it? Were you like a fan watching at first? Like, how did that all get started for you?
I think it started with my family. So growing up, my dad loved Eddie Murphy. And so even as a kid, like some of my favorite movies were old Eddie Murphy movies like Trading Places, Coming to America, all the kind of Beverly Hills Cop movies. And as I got into like comedic movies, like I wanted to learn more about himself. So the first real comedy that I really do remember is like some of Eddie's early specials, like Eddie Murphy Raw, which I watched with my dad when I was younger. And I think like that really got my interest because it was just like you're a solo person, you're on stage, and you have to like captivate people, and you have to be vulnerable, you have to be honest. And so I was just like, wow, like that's crazy. And then my family also, we would love watching SNL together. And although that isn't like really like traditional stand-up, like they're all comedians and they're doing like sketch work, but even a lot of the opening monologues would be like stand-up sets and stuff of that nature. So I was always just like, this is really cool. And yeah, man, as I got into college, and as I just got older, I like fell in love with it. Just as a fan, learning more about people's stories. I think for me, storytelling is something that I just love. And that was like my initial kind of journey into stand-up, and just going to actual shows when I moved to New York was like life-changing. It was just crazy.
When did you actually say, I want to actually start experimenting with writing my own stuff and storytelling? And was that during college or after you graduated?
I'd say the first real initial ideas started when I was home during COVID. So this would be about like March of 2021 all the way around March of like early 2021. I started just thinking about, like, okay, living in New York, I've had some pretty interesting experiences, and these are things that have happened to me and they could be stories to tell. I wasn't really sure what they would be. So from around like early 2021, I just kept like a rolling Google Docs of just like things that happened, experiences, stuff with family, anything. And from then on, all the way through graduation, I would just keep writing things. So all the way to like May of 2023. But again, it was never like a serious idea. Like, will I actually do it? I started thinking more about it in 2023, but even then it was just like, do I have the nerve to go and talk about these things? And I also hadn't fully fleshed out the ideas. It was more like, I think it could be something, but I think part of me was also like protecting myself. Oh, if you don't fully flesh out the idea, then there's nothing to perform. So it was like, oh, less pressure. I didn't really tell too many people about it either. But yeah, by the end of grad in like that summer of 2023, it was probably almost like 10, 15 pages long, and it just was a bunch of different things. Yeah, it was crazy. And then the end of 2023, November, December, I like really started thinking about it a lot more. And again, having my roommates, Moye, JJ, Matthew, a lot of really encouraging people who were all kind of creatives in their own sense. And even my older brother, who I started telling more about like my aspirations, they're all like, dude, you should try it. Like, you have nothing to lose. It's low stakes. And then, yeah, finally, in like the day before New Year's Eve, December 30th of 2023, I had spent like 5 days in a row. I had time off from work around the Christmas holiday period. And so I just spent 5 days. I had maybe a 5 minute thing that I had written out. And I just started performing it in front of the mirror every day by myself, performing. And even then, I still wasn't like, "Oh, I do it, will I, like, won't I?" And then I just woke up that morning, the 30th, and I was like, listen, if you don't do it now, you're going to keep putting it off. So I called my brother. I was like, all right, I'm going to do it today. He was like, all right, find a spot, find a time, let me know, tell your roommates, we'll be there to do it. And that was like the start.
So the first time you did it was just in front of your friends, like performing.
No, so I like had told them about bits, but like they hadn't actually seen me really do it. We went to the comedy club. So I live in the Bushwick part of Brooklyn, and there's this local club called Tiny Cupboard, which I'd never been to before, but I just looked up on the internet like open mics where you can perform. And so how the whole kind of open miking works is a lot of the more established comedy clubs, places like the Stand, the Comedy Cellar, the Tiny Cupboard, Eastvale Comedy Club, they'll have pretty much every day they'll have open mics, and these will be in like rooms pretty close to the main rooms where like the actual paid performers will perform. And it's like an actual, there's like a little stage, there's lighting. A lot of these places will even record your open mics. And what you do is you just show up at a certain time, you pay $5, and they give you 5 minutes to perform, usually 5 minutes. It can be 3 minutes, sometimes four. There are some that do seven, but generally it's 5 minutes. And so I found the Tiny Cupboard online, and I was like, all right, guys, they have a 5:30 open mic. Let's all meet there and let's see what happens. And so the first time for them was also again seeing me do it in front of, I think it might have been like 12 people that day for the open mic. And that was like the first time.
That's incredible. I do want to ask you about how that very first time went for you, but something I want to go back on is you having that running list of a Google Doc and like just keeping it to yourself and sharing it. I think that's something I definitely relate to. I remember when I started out with like blog writing on the internet, even that I feel like is a bit easier because when I published it wasn't like I was standing in front of people and telling this and getting their live feedback and reactions live. Like it's just some article that lives on the internet and some people may read it or people may not. I didn't really expect anyone to read at that time, so it didn't feel as, I guess, nerve-wracking to hit like publish. Why do you think you were, obviously there are fears about being judged, but specifically if you had to describe like what was it about it that made you hesitant and be like, oh, I don't want to perform this right now, or I don't feel like I'm ready?
I think a number of things. I think one, again, just like shyness and like maybe even a bit of shame in some of the things that I would be addressing. And just like, I feel like my close friends know me super well, but even all of them might not know about some of the stories. I might not know about some of these things. And I think to just put myself out there and talk about these things, I was just like, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I'm ready for it. Like I was so fearful about how it would be received. And so those are all just like big worries of mine. And then on top of that, I just didn't want to like really half-ass it in the sense of if I was going to do it, I really wanted to believe and I wanted to commit to it. And I just didn't feel like I was quite there with all the things that I was trying to juggle. And so I think like I had to mature a little. I had to experience a few more things, and I had to just get to a point where it was like, listen, like in your heart of hearts, like you have to do some soul searching, and like I really do care about this. And for me, again, it's like it's helped me overcome certain feelings, certain stresses, certain things that I might have felt ashamed about or something. Comedy is so like, for instance, there's this open mic I went to last week, and this guy comes on stage and he's wearing a hat, and he takes his hat off, and he's like, hair reveal, I'm balding. And it's again like ordinarily people don't want to talk about them balding, or people don't want to talk about relationships or personal trauma. But it's like when you're up on there, there's not really any shame. Audience people can judge you or they won't, but they're here to see what you have to say, and they're here to learn and be entertained. And so like at that point, shame and fear goes out the window. And I think it just took me a second to understand that a bit more. And after that, now I feel a lot more comfortable talking about damn near everything, not everything, but so many more things that I would have thought that I would be comfortable talking about.
That's great. And it sounds like it was like the hesitancy in the beginning was about being a bit ashamed or embarrassed by it, but you're finding as you're starting to get more reps in and seeing other people do it, that it's actually a space where you have really nothing to be afraid of, right? Because people are really open and receptive to that in that sort of like comedy environment. I feel like with anything, and maybe especially even like performing art specifically, like the first time is always the hardest to like break, get through that barrier. And then once you get more and more repetitions at it, you start to find that you're like more comfortable. And our coaches tell us the same for that for tennis matches. It's just if you haven't played a match in a while, you're gonna be very nervous. But if you play one every week or so, you do a 5 minute show every week or so, you're gonna start to find that you can handle it a lot better. So I love how you were telling yourself it's like now or never to get started. But how was that first performance for you?
It was interesting because I think my whole even just performing in front of people has changed. I think when I was younger, I was a lot less self-conscious, and so I wouldn't think too much about a presentation in class or even like any sort of like theatrical performance that we might do growing up. But I think when I got into high school and college, I definitely say that I would get a bit more nervous in the sense of if I didn't really spend the time to prepare super well and just like everything laid out for me, if I like even half-assed it a little, like I know that I would get nervous and it wouldn't go well. So for this one, I was just like put in the hours, practice it over and over. And like my initial thing was like first like just make sure that you remember things and like at base level, just remember what you have to say, present those. You can get better delivery later on. Content can always be improved upon, but like at this point, this is what you have in front of you and you just gotta perform it. And so it's funny, like the whole system, how it works is like you go in and you sign up. And so you'll know that you'll be next up because they always do this thing where they're like, okay, up next is Alex Yang and on deck is Ramy Shafi. So when that next person is coming, that you're next up. And so for me, I think I was maybe sixth or seventh to go. So like the first five or so people, I was more like watching them and I was like really locked in and like trying to appreciate what they were doing and just pick any things up. But then by the guy who was right before me, the sixth person, and they were like, Ramy Shafi's on deck. I couldn't like focus on his performance at all. Like I was just thinking about remembering lines. I brought my notebook with me. I was looking through it and like in my hands, this is a thing that's been happening to me. It happens a little less now as I've performed more, but like my hands will get a little numb. Like it's like my body's preparing me because it knows what's about to happen. And I think initially I used to fight that a little in the sense of I get annoyed about why it's happening, but I'd like really try hard to like just catch my breath, deep breaths, regulate my breathing, just even flex my hands, get some more blood flowing to get rid of the numbness. But as I talked to my friends, it was more like your body knows that you really do value this and like you care about it. And so it's like almost like preparing you for battle or preparing you for war. Like it's like a sign of, you're about to do something that you care about. And so once I got on there, I think I told my brother and my friends that I was nervous and like, they were like, we couldn't really tell. Like I could feel that I was nervous. And the funny thing was like, it just went by so quickly. Truthfully, I don't really not remember too much about it. I've watched it back now. I have the footage of it. And so it's helped me remember it more. But in the moment, even if I got last or something, it wasn't processing. It was more get from point A to point B and just try and get through the whole process. And so afterwards, I felt fantastic. It was almost a runner's high, or it's one of those things where you just feel satisfaction for getting it done and like being able to be up there. And then, yeah, it was just like, it was really a blur, I'll be honest. And I think the one thing that I took from that is like going forward, I just want to be more present while I'm performing because part of it is like, you could have stuff rehearsed, you could have stuff written down. But again, you're interacting with the audience. Yeah, you are telling stuff that you have written, but it's like you have to really be there and be live for people to see. And it's got to really be natural. And so those are some of my biggest takeaways. But I think, again, it was just like wow, you finally did it type of thing.
Yeah. And hearing you talk about that, it actually reminded me a lot of a tennis match for me and how I prepare for that, because when I know I'm about to go on, I feel, like you said, very nervous too. Just like palms are like getting pretty sweaty. The muscles are all tightening up. And sometimes the match can be a blur for you if you're not focused or in the right mind space. And something that we're fortunate enough on our college team to have a psychologist that works with us. And one of the things he tells us is to be more present, is just like regulating your breathing. I think, even comparing this to stand up, it's a bit easier because you have a 20-second pause in between points to recollect yourself. I imagine for you, you're talking for most of the time. You're not really having those kind of long breaks where you can like recollect, just observe what's going on and be more present. But it's the same kind of concept. One thing I want to follow up on about that is that experience in your first performance. You experience a bit of nerves, and then afterwards you get this great feeling. What made you want to continue doing this the way that you're continuing to do it now? Because you're working, you have a job, and then you have this project that you're doing that's potentially going to create a lot of nerves and stress for you, but also there's some upside to it. What do you see as the purpose behind this and why you want to pursue something like this?
I think there's a number of reasons. One, if we're just thinking about it like along with the work that I'm doing, like actual job, I think that like I was really searching for something that would give me kind of fulfillment and enjoyment outside of work. And so I'd always wanted to have more hobbies that were outside of like maybe just playing soccer once a week with friends. And so that was like one aspect of it. But I think too, I love to work with people on projects and I like to collaborate. But at the same time, I feel like I've always searched for something that could be my own and like something that I could say, okay, I've gotten inspiration and I've gotten help from a lot of people, but this is really me and myself that I've done. And it's just something that I can feel proud of, which again, it does really mean a lot to me. I can't really explain why that is. It's not like it's not, maybe it has to do with just like a general insecurity or just aspiring to really work on or own something that you are proud of. But again, that's a really big part of it. And I think too, it's like a cathartic feeling because it's like the stuff that I like to talk about, like to joke about, they're all things that have like really happened to me, or at least for now, they're all like real experiences or really grounded in reality. It's not so much like observational or commenting on things that are happening in the world or things that are happening to just the average person. It's all very personal. And I think growing up, I think when I was younger, it was easier for me to share how I was feeling or share kind of thoughts. But I think as I've gotten older, I don't know quite why, but I've gotten a bit more closeted. And I think this is really helping me both in my personal life, being open with people, being honest with people, but even like challenges that I have in my life, I can express or talk about these things on stage and make light of them. And I think it's helped me process challenging things as well.
Yeah, I love that last point because I don't know any comedians personally besides yourself. And it's like thinking about, do they view themselves as like an entertainer, like just serving the audience, or is there something that they're also getting out of it and sharing these stories? And it sounds like from what you're saying, there's also something to it in terms of being able to describe how you're feeling and reflecting on these actual stories that happened, which I really love to hear. So for you, when let's say you've had a show and you've seen the feedback and reaction, how do you go back and process what happened and try to do better on the next one that you're planning on doing, whenever that is?
Great question. I think early on I didn't really understand it in the sense of comedy is different from a lot of art forms in the sense that you get real time feedback on if people find something funny or not. And I think the hard part with that is not to be too disheartened if something doesn't hit the first time. I think part of my initial fear with even really getting into this was more like there's so many comedians that I love, Ramy Youssef, Gerard Carmichael, Chris Rock, Malik LSL, and it's people like that. And I watch them and I'm like, you're just in awe and you're like, damn, can I ever get there? And it's taking me time to understand. And of course, with every kind of bomb, like you understand it more, but you're never going to be perfect from the start. And so if you don't get a laugh on something, if a set doesn't go the way you want it to, it's like how you get better. There's only one way to get better. It's trying different things. And so I think for me, my whole process is more like, okay, I can try a set somewhere and, let's say I wrote a 5 minute set about whatever and I tried it somewhere and you get laughs on 3 out of the 5 jokes. I think I'm not going to initially come back and be like, okay, these 3 are killers and there's 2 are flops. I think you really have to test it again and again. And so I think the whole thing with me is like really testing it in different spaces, testing it with different people. And then I think that kind of helps me understand, okay, is there something to go off of? Because again, ultimately, I am doing this for myself, but you have to serve the audience and you do have to make the people laugh. And again, I think sometimes I would struggle with, there's just one joke that I want to have in. I want to have it in for me, but it might be too specific or it might be unrelatable. And so it doesn't necessarily hit for people. And so sometimes you also have to just accept and be like, maybe this isn't a great fit for this kind of set and it could be better placed elsewhere. And then I think too, like I was telling you before we hopped on this, but I had performed at my first quote unquote ticketed show this past week. And I was the host and a bunch of musicians, friends of mine were performing, some very talented musicians like Hibiscus, Moye, Action, 4TL. And so I was hosting the show and I did an opening 7 minute set. And to open up with that, even before performing, I had communicated with like the people who were organizing the show and I'd sent them like an audio file of what I'd be performing. And they told me most of it was funny, but there was some stuff about religion that they were like, it's funny, but we don't know how it'll be received. So then I had this thought. I was like, should I like dumb it down? Should I tame it a little? Should I? Then I was also like, listen, like, again, you're doing this for you. And if one person doesn't find it funny, it doesn't necessarily mean that other people won't find it funny. And again, the type of comedy that I'm trying to do and just the comedy that I love, it's not meant to appeal to the masses. And so you have to keep that in mind when you get feedback from other people. Because they didn't like it doesn't mean it isn't funny. And again, it's like finding your own self by creating, writing, trying different things, taking risks. And so I think that's like the best way I've been able to continue to grow.
Yeah. So it's a balance of what you feel like is authentic to you and what you want to do, but also, keeping in mind your audience as well and taking their feedback.
100%. Because I think for me, it's like when I'm writing, If I have an idea, I might like, okay, try and write about it a bit. But whenever I hit roadblocks, I do this thing where it's like, one, is this really real to you? Is it tangible? Do you know what it is? And I think for me, again, right now, starting off, it just has to really be grounded in like something that I've experienced or something someone close to me has really been a part of. Because I don't know, I find that I haven't got to that point, and I want to get to that point as a writer where I can just talk about other things that haven't directly I've been a part of. But I think like that authenticity and just even putting myself out there and getting people to know me, I think the best way I can do that is by really trying to make it as personal and as honest as possible, which is not easy, but I like it even more.
I think honesty is a great word and term for that, because I feel like you have a unique opportunity in talking to people, I guess, to be as honest as possible, right? And it can be received because it's comedy and jokes. And I feel like that's not something that we get to do in our regular day to day as people or as students. One thing I would love to hear from you is, where do you see this moving forward? You've started to get in, you had your first ticketed show. Do you want to scale up your commitment to this or spend more hours?
Yeah, I think when I started, I didn't really have any, I didn't set any goals. There were no any, not many lofty aspirations. It was more like step one, do it, see how it goes, see how you feel, you enjoy it, and if it's something that you want to continue doing, continue to run with it. And I think like in the last month, I've really ramped up like my performances or like open mics. Like I try and do maybe 4 or 5 a week now, which I think has just really helped me become more confident in like all different places. Like I've performed in a bowling alley, performed in like a vintage store, performed in some bars. Like there's open mics all over. And I think now, again, I haven't really like thought about it too much in terms of like, I need X or Y to happen to like really feel like it's worth it. I think for me, I want to keep running with it. I think in my wildest dreams, it would be something that I would do almost full time, where it's like one of the main things that I do. I mean, maybe other things to supplant it versus a more kind of traditional sort of job. And again, I mean, that takes time and yeah, it's not easy, but I think like I love it so much where it's not something that I want to give up. And I also think I love it so much where I don't want it to just be like a more of an afterthought. I kind of want it to be a big part of my life. And I think I've found that to be the case because I mean, like even in the past few months, like when I'm working and stuff, or even kind of on the train doing different things, like I've really felt like in my mind there's like a little shift where like you're thinking a bit more actively about like, can this be a bit like, oh, this girl didn't text me back and she gave me such and such excuse. Is there some material there? Or just in life interactions. And I think like I'm not trying to force it and I'm not trying to like make things happen for the plot, but it's more like just trying to be more observant. And I think that's helped me with my writing, just being more like understanding and cognizant of things happening around me. And so like, yeah, I really I want to stick with it. I want to run with it. And I think it's awesome. I do want to say that I'm incredibly lucky to have really wonderful friends. Again, I've kind of talked about them very briefly, but Moye, who's been one of my friends forever, we were roommates my freshman year. And he's truly one of my biggest inspirations from a creative standpoint, from a kind of just doing things yourself standpoint. My other roommate, JJ, better known as Black Hibiscus, is a creative that encourages me and inspires me a ton. Matthew, my other roommate, someone who just kind of pushes me. If he knows that I haven't gone to an open mic, he'll remind me. Moy's girlfriend, Lily, is another just very close, encouraging friend. And then just family too. Like I think me loving it more has made me be more open to sharing with family. So like my brother, obviously, he's seen my sets, he's seen me perform. He's one of my biggest supporters, encourages me through the roof. My younger sister, although she's never seen me perform live yet, I send her videos all the time. Even with my mom and stuff, I think my mom was the hardest person to like really kind of touch on this about, just because again, my mom, she's worked really hard and I know she has certain kind of more traditional things that she would want me to like really focus around, whether it's a traditional job and stuff of that nature. So like to even kind of do something like this was never something she really thought about. But even now, like being able to kind of not necessarily talk to her about the things that I'm talking about, but even just letting her know like, hey, I really do care about this and I'm putting such and such time. I had this show there and this is going well. And then even her sisters, my aunts, are some of the people that I actually send my stuff to and like get their feedback on. And so I think because I've been able to get more comfortable sharing with my closest friends and my family, I think now I feel even more comfortable and confident in it than ever. Not to say that my confidence can fluctuate. You can have a bomb in one life and like, you might have to do a little self-evaluation. But I think like I love that it's humbling because you can never be too confident. You just got to roll with the punches, man. And it's something that I loved. And 4 months in, I want to stick with it and see where this goes.
I really love hearing that. It's great that I feel like your friends and family are so supportive. And it also sounds, if I'm understanding correctly, like having creative people like friends around you also played a big part in getting you to like take that leap and also try to perform yourself. And then I also love hearing about how they're holding you accountable for like
Oh yeah,
putting yourself out there, right?
definitely.
Because I can imagine if one day you might not be feeling it and it's God, I really don't want to be like standing in front of like people right now, or like maybe a last year didn't go as well. Like just keep putting yourself out there again and having friends encouraging you to do that. I think that's really great.
Yeah, no, I'm incredibly lucky, and I think with comedy too, different from other performance arts. But again, like my roommates and my close friends, I don't really have any close friends that are comedians. Like I know I've started to get to know a lot more comedians. But like in any medium, comedy, for instance, like you just have to grasp, man. Like you have to go to open mics on late nights. It can be rainy, it can be cold. You just have to like. There's no, and I think what I'm starting to appreciate too is like I'm noticing that I'm getting better. Obviously, it's a slow burn and it's a slow process. It's just like you have to put in time. One bomb will lead to this, and one great set might lead to that. Even for instance, I did a set yesterday, and there was a guy I was talking to, very nice guy, and I performed right before he did, and he sent me a note, and on the note he just had like one little like insight, and he was like, there's one thing you mentioned in the bit, and he was like, listen, if you even expand on that and make that a whole story, I think it can be really strong. And so like you will find your community of people who are doing stuff like you. You just have to put yourself out there. And he gave me his Instagram after, and I'm just like looking through. And this guy's like a pretty established performer. He's got like 10,000 followers. He opens for this really big comedian that I like named Mike Birbiglia. And it's just like, put yourself out there. Don't be afraid. And it's not going to always go great, but you're going to meet people. You're going to learn. And, if you really show that you care about things, people will also care. And I think you only get better. That's just the way to do it, man.
That's some amazing wisdom. I love that. Cool. One other thing I actually would like to do with you. I've never done this before, but a friend suggested I do this. This podcast is about decision making, and we talk about careers a lot too, but I have some like quick fire, like this or that decisions you can just do. So yeah, are you ready?
Let's do this.
Sure. So it'll be like two things and you say which one you'd prefer or like more. So New York or LA?
New York.
Pizza or burgers?
Burgers. It's close. It's close, Alex. Right now, I'd say pizza, but generally speaking, burgers.
Okay. Since you said burgers, In-N-Out or Shake Shack?
Oh, In-N-Out. It's not even close.
Not even close. All right. Clippers or Lakers?
Lakers.
I think I already know this one. Lakers, yeah. All right. Subway, taking the subway or city biking?
City biking. I love it, man. There's no rush like a city bike. Weaving through traffic, weaving through cars. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Getting through the chaos, yeah. Book or podcast?
That's tough. If it was a podcast where I wasn't watching the video, I'd probably say book. But again, this is so tough, man. Because like nowadays, because I've had less time to, I'm watching more podcasts and listening to them more than I am actually actively reading. So I'd say probably podcast right now. But man, I still love books, Mom. I do. But it's about finding the time.
That's encouraging for my podcast. Okay, and then the last one, Kendrick or Drake?
Kendrick.
Kendrick, okay.
Easy.
All right, I'm his team, Kendrick.
Absolutely. And he's done with it soon, Drake fans. Be prepared. It's coming soon.
Hope you enjoyed today's episode of How I Decided. I think a few of my main takeaways are that we're often so full of ideas and we keep them hidden in a Google Doc or on a Google Drive, but we're so hesitant to share them with the world. And the hardest part is to just get over that fear and put yourself out there for the first time. Really, for Ramy, that's how he started to be able to truly receive feedback and begin to improve on his work. Another thing I took away is that you're not going to be perfect from the start. It's easy to see other comedians, other athletes, other students doing great work and to be discouraged by your own performance. But you have to remember that to get to where they are, they often had to go through a lot of failure and setback. So just keep putting in the reps. Finally, my last thing, and this pertains, I think, specifically to decision making, is that fear is often something that we have to face in decision making, but it's so much better when we have supportive people and friends around us who could really push us to be outside of our comfort zone. And as we kind of break that initial seal, it just becomes easier and easier to get through that. Thank you for listening today, and let me know if you guys have any thoughts on who I should have next or any improvements for the show.